good to have you here.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
You are just back from Ukraine, on your way to Russia at some point soon. We'll discuss that a little later in this session. I want to start, though, with the premise of this session. We have been talking a lot at this conference about the urgency of the energy transition. Right now, it does appear that nuclear is having somewhat of a moment. At COP28 here in Dubai, just December of last year, the final text, while non-binding, of course, recognized the role that nuclear energy plays in combating climate change, and 22 countries agreed to work towards tripling nuclear energy capacity by 2030. So I want to drill down a little bit and get your sense. Nobody better to talk about where we are at, the opportunities, the risks of nuclear power than you, Rafael. So thank you for joining us. Let's start with laying the table, as it were. Just how significant do you believe COP28 was in terms of the energy transition? And from those countries who signed up to what was a non-binding agreement, but an important one at that, and historic, where do you see the real investment?
Well, like you say, COP28 was important in so many respects, in terms of public policies, in terms of public discourse at the same time, and in particular for nuclear, because, you know, COPs, for those who have been following these events, was not a place where you would talk a lot about nuclear, if at all. And then not only you talk about nuclear, but you say that nuclear should be accelerated. And then you have countries that come to Dubai and say there in Dubai at that time, we will triple our nuclear effort. Okay, so these are statements, like you say, they may be not non-binding, but they signify, Becky, I believe, what I like to define as a return to realism, in the sense that how many real deployable tools you have to decarbonize energy mixes in the world, which are making a contribution right now and could be scalable. And then you have to, there may be a few, but nuclear is clearly one of those. And this is why we see you talk about the investment. This is why we see the investment in China, you see it in India, you see it in Russia, you see it in Egypt, you see it in Turkey.
And you see it here.
And we have seen it, and we see more. I think the Emirates is an example in this regard. 15 or 16 years ago, this country had zilch nuclear, and this is nuclear technology. It's a very sophisticated technology. And then, in a remarkable period of time, they were able to create the capacity, to create the institutionality that you need, and then to do it hand in hand with the IEA. And so now you have 25%, a quarter of the power that is powering us now, which is nuclear. And as I understand in my conversations with the government, they are intending to do more. And we see in this very region also other countries that are very seriously contemplating the possibility.
So let's talk about the challenges. There's nobody better to assess the challenges as we talk about the opportunities. A long time lag between planning and operation, cost in and of itself, the worry about weapons proliferation, the risk of meltdown, the health and climate risks, and there are some. So when you think about those challenges, and we think about in the past the Chernobyls and the Fukushimas of this world, which had really dented both the appetite and ambition for nuclear, when you consider those challenges, and some of those are more real than others,
indeed,
where would you assess or put the role of nuclear in the energy mix going forward? There are some, the great advocates of nuclear, who will say, you know, we're going to have 100% nuclear going forward. We're not.
No.
There are others who are much more realistic, who will say, let's consider nuclear as a 20%, you know, a portion in the...
That is rather closer to the mark.
Right.
Because nuclear is more of a baseload kind of energy. It's the energy that will give your mix stability, and continuity. Basically, you have a nuclear power reactor, you have energy for 100 years, more or less 70, 80 at the current levels that we are having. So nuclear energy does not have an aspiration to be a dominant, but is a stabilizing articulator in an intelligent, integrated energy mix.
Let's talk about some of those challenges then. Let me talk about the first two, because I think they're important if we are to see at least perhaps a 20% mix globally going forward. Long time lags between planning and operation and cost. These are swinging challenges.
There is a conventional wisdom that a nuclear power plant would take you more than a decade or 2 decades or whatever. Well, look at the Emirates. Was that the case? Look at what's happening in China. What used to happen in the United States and France. So there have been projects that have been off mark in terms of, because of a number of reasons, which are project specific and not technology inherent, which of course took longer than expected. But in general, the average, and let me address another issue. Sometimes people say, people who don't like nuclear or consider that nuclear is not good in terms of climate change, that it's too late for nuclear. Well, let me say that 2050 or 2060 or 2070, whatever arbitrary target that you could put, is not an end station. You have to build networks and mixes that are going to keep our planet well, not simply check a box and say we made it in 2047. So you have to have something which is sustainable and which is going to take us to the next century in a healthy way.
And you use the term sustainable. There are climate and health risks associated with nuclear, which we oftentimes don't talk as much about these days. Can you address just how you overcome some of those? Because, we often talk about nuclear as one of the cleanest energies in the energy transition.
Indeed.
So this needs to be addressed.
Well, absolutely. Everything needs to be addressed. But again, it's about public discourse and doing what we are doing now. Is explaining and talking to people. When you look at nuclear energy, and rightly so, you analyze the two major accidents that happened, which were basically Chernobyl and Fukushima, which were man-made accidents or accidents that occurred because of mistakes or negligence or whatever. It's overlooked the fact that we have 70 years of commercial nuclear operation without. So by any standard, by any parameter, the safety of the industry and the security of the industry is there. But granted, I think we need to explain, perhaps the nuclear sector has been opaque, has not been open to dialogue, which would present the case and always and present the arguments. In any case, for us, the IAEA does not have a commercial interest whatsoever in this. So from our perspective, it's about having it in a safe way, in a secure way. And you mentioned in passing an important factor, which is non-proliferation, which is that by using nuclear energy or by having nuclear materials, you are not going to be creating a security or military danger in the future, and that evokes other cases.
Well, let's talk about other cases, because I promised we'd talk a bit about Ukraine, get an update from you on that, your message into Russia. We also should talk about Iran. You were recently reported as saying that Iran is galloping ahead with its uranium enrichment. You say it continues to put up barriers to inspectors, and you suggest Iran is the only non-nuclear weapon state which is enriching uranium at a very, very high level. Are you proposing? Go on.
All facts. We do not have political agendas here. If Iran wants to have a nuclear power program, as they have, they can, and rightly so, no problem with that. But they have to have a system of inspections which is commensurate with what they are doing, and they keep not giving the answers and the cooperation that they should be extending to the agency.
So we the latest report found that Iran was increasing its production of highly enriched uranium. What do we know about the program at present? How concerned are you given the recent increased hostilities in the region?
Well, of course, this is an accumulation of complexities. So, because in a region, in the current circumstance, to have a country that it is presenting a face which is not entirely transparent when it comes to its nuclear activities. Of course, this increases dangers. There is loose talk about nuclear weapons, more and more, including in Iran. Recently, a very high official said, in fact, we have everything. It's disassembled. Well, please let me know, what do you have? Because you are an NPT, Non-Proliferation Treaty party, so you're not supposed ever, by your own decision, to have nuclear weapons. We see this in this country. We see this in other countries as well. So I believe that the nuclear factor should be always within the well-established rules that apply to the vast majority of the 30-something countries that use nuclear energy without any problem.
Is this talk of nuclear weapons, is it being normalized? Because it is an incredulous narrative.
Yes, it's a good point.
Appears to be more credulous at this point.
That's the danger, Becky. That's the danger, that we normalize, that we get used to hearing these things. And look, let me give you an example. Look what happened in North Korea. Until 2006, we were in the same kind of situation. There were negotiations, 6-party talks, 4-party talks, conference here, conference there. One day, the line was crossed. So we don't want to see that in the Middle East. And this is why my plea and my work is to work together with Iran. We believe in diplomacy. We don't believe in bombing. We believe in diplomacy. But for that to happen, we need our inspectors to be allowed to do its work. History, and recent history, proves in this region that when you start curtailing the access of international inspectors, normally the story does not end very well. So I think we need to think twice, and we need to ensure that this cooperation prevails.
The IAEA effectively has a sort of, a civil nuclear power program for dummies. I mean, there are guardrails.
Indeed.
And there is a program which includes the IAEA's
Absolutely.
involvement.
It's called the Milestones. It's like your user's guide for nuclear. And actually, it was the book that the Emirates first read when they decided they wanted to transform this country into one of the, beacons of peaceful nuclear energy in this part of the world, which means that we work with them, we give them the assistance, we help create the institutionality, density that you need to get it right.
Let's talk about Ukraine. As far as Ukrainian authorities are concerned, the latest inspector's report reveals no positive news at Zaporizhzhia. What's your sense? You're just back.
I'm just back. I crossed the front lines for the 4th time since the beginning of the war, and this is quite dramatic because this power plant is not in any part of the occupied part of Ukraine. It's on the front line. I cross a line and there is a Ukrainian soldier, and then a few meters down the line there is a Russian soldier. Okay, so it's there. So, of course, the volatility, the fragility of the whole thing is huge. And when the war started, there were attacks, direct attacks on the nuclear power plant. So we, in a way, imposed, if I can use the word, being a head of an international organization, I should never say that, but in a certain sense, we thrust ourselves, we plunged into the conflict, and now we have a permanent presence there, which is in and by itself a deterrent of sorts. People know, whomever this would be, that the international community is there. We are providing technical support, and most importantly, like you do, we are informing. We are telling, have you noticed that when it comes to Zaporizhzhia, there is no fake news? Why? Because the IAEA is there. If somebody says, well, Zaporizhzhia is in flames, or the contrary, is a kindergarten, no, the IAEA is there telling it as it is.
What's your assessment, in a word, I mean, on a scale of 1 to 10 at this point, you were significantly and very concerned this time last year. Where do you stand on that?
You know what the problem is with Zaporizhzhia? You go to Zaporizhzhia on a sunny day and you believe that you are in a nuclear power plant here in Baraka. Everything is apparently calm. But then the next hour you can have a drone coming and attacking. So it is the uncertainty and the terrible fragility of war. I can be 0, I can be 10 within minutes.
You're on your way at some point to Russia. What will your message be there?
My message is cooperate with the IAEA. Remember that it's only working with us, avoiding a nuclear accident, that we will all benefit, because no one, whichever side of the conflict you are sitting, will benefit from a nuclear accident. And this is why I'm going to Russia. I will speak to President Putin, as I did last year. And this dialogue should continue. At the end of the day, it's about dialogue.
And I want to finish this on a positive note. The IAEA is an organization that's been around for some 70 years. As we started this conversation about powering the future and discussed pathways to sustainable global change, which very definitely at this point includes the nuclear file. What's your message to this audience?
The message is that we are, in spite of all the challenges that we have discussed just now, I think nuclear is part of the mitigation of the real problem. And let me mention something we did not touch upon. Nuclear is also, and we are doing that, is about nuclear medicine, fighting cancer, radiotherapy in Africa, atoms for food, protecting, creating drought-resisting crops, managing water. So we hope to be, as I said, a force for good.
Rafael Grossi, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for this session.